Welcome, everybody, to the Dr. Leadership Lounge, where we have conversations with business leaders from all walks of life about how and why they are successful. Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Dr. Leadership Podcast. We're here on the Leadership Lounge. I am super stoked today. I've got an outstanding guest, a gentleman by the name of Charran, who is an author and soon to be launched, I'm sure, international bestseller book coming out on February 12th. We're actually spooling this thing up before it's even out on the airwaves. That book is Have You Ever Had a Boss That? Very, very thrilled to talk about that. Eric is a visionary technology executive, an author and a thought leader with over 25 years of experience in transforming global enterprises through digital innovation, data-driven strategy, and AI-driven solutions. Eric has led transformative initiatives at organizations including small ones like Microsoft, Capital One, where he served as chief architect around cloud resilience, digital transformation, and data infrastructure efficiency. Man, we are super, super stoked to have you on the lounge today. Eric, welcome to the show.
Brett, thanks so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome, awesome job. And I mean, it's got to be an exciting time here, right? You're about ready to launch this book. But before we get into that, one of the questions I always kind of open it up so people kind of know the background and how you got, I kind of call it, how'd you get to here today? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to a position where all of a sudden you're about ready to be this world-renowned author. How'd you get here?
Yeah, great question. I'll try not to go maybe too far back,
It's
but
okay. I was
born in
born
born in yeah, I'll
on a
start I'll start
Tuesday.
I'll start right there. I don't know what day I was born. I'll have to look that one up. But I was born in Queens, New York, Jackson Heights, parent of an immigrant and a mom from Chicago. We lived there until I was about 9. My dad took an accounting job here in a small town called Horsham, Pennsylvania, where I grew up and went to high school and had great times. In high school, moved on to college, and then right after college, I had this opportunity. And I've been around for a while, Brent. So like this was the late 90s, maybe like 97. There's this thing called the dot-com bubble.
Oh yeah,
And anybody that could code HTML or could say the word computer, you were basically writing your own salary out of college. And
that's
so
awesome.
that's kind of what I did. And I joined a marketing research firm because my undergrad is in marketing with a minor in human resources, and I have an MBA. So don't tell
Excellent.
anybody that thinks I'm this technology erudite. I don't tell people that a lot, but it actually helps me quite a bit talk to business
The people
people and
skills, yeah,
communicate.
yeah.
Exactly. As I transitioned into my first job, I rewrote the entire interviewing system in this little program called Microsoft Access 97 for those that remember that.
Wow.
And then I went on to doing data warehousing and then found consulting as my great love because when you're a full-time employee, not that many people tend to listen to you when you're right. But when they pay you to come in on an hourly basis and tell you
They're
where they're wrong,
attentive.
they're attentive and they actually do what you say. So I
Yeah.
consulted for was it maybe a few years. Then I had it in my head when I was around my early 20s that I wanted to be the youngest CIO. And so I went to work for a small debt collection company in Horsham, PA.
Okay.
And my goal was to, become the CIO of that company. And at the time, reported to an excellent, vice president of software engineering. I was his number one or number two guy. I think he had two number ones. So we don't know who was the actual number one.
Smart man. Got to have
But
a backup. That's right.
yeah, exactly. So I was his backup, and then he was one seat away from the CIO,
Very cool.
and had some of the experiences I had in that job found their way into the book,
Okay.
and eventually he said, "Hey, I know that you've got aspirations," and he goes, "I know where you want to go. Unless I get hit by a bus, I'm not going anywhere. So you should start." And this was said with the best
Oh,
intentions. He's like,
absolutely. Hey, I'm 40 years
"You
old. I got 20 years here ahead of
right."
you. You're need to be on a faster trajectory. I get it. That's great of him to
Right.
have done that, actually.
He really was, and he said, "Hey, just your star." I mean, these were his words. This is not my. This is my recollection of what he said.
You're a humble
He said,
man,
"Your
which is
star
good,
is
but that's
rising."
okay. Yeah, you go ahead
Right.
and pat yourself. That it's deserved, right? You're,
Yeah. Thanks. He said, "Your star is rising," and he says, "Just don't know how high it's going to go here." And I said, "Are you telling me that you're getting rid of me?" And he's like, "Absolutely not. I'll take you as long as you want to stay here. I just want you to know that there are things out there for you." And he was right. So I at the time I had brought in I worked with Microsoft as a partner for a long time,
sure.
And so I brought them into the company I was working at the time to kind of help, just re-architect and reorient some of our systems. And I had said the way I got hired at Microsoft was I had actually applied to another position at a local company, and I listed a bunch of Microsoft people on my resume as references. And these folks immediately, when they were called, they're like, "Hey, are you looking for a job?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm about to actually go and get the offer letter and sign the offer letter from this new position." They're like, "Don't do that."
Hold on a
And so they
second. We
sent,
might have an
yeah,
option. That's awesome.
yeah, they sent three people out to meet with me at a Japanese sushi place
Yep.
near my work, and they said, "We want you to come work for us." And when I first arrived at Microsoft, I came in and I had been to the office before, and I came in and they're like, "Eric, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I work here now." They're like, "That's amazing." So
Well, it's a big
and
company. Not
I was
everybody knew yet. The email announcement hadn't gone
right,
out, so that's okay.
right, right. And so I walked in and I was like, they're like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "I'm living the dream." They're like, "Okay, tone it down."
That's awesome. How
You-
old were you at this
uh,
point? What age were you at this point?
I think I was 25,
Man, what a
25 to
great
26 at this
story.
time.
That's friggin'
Yeah.
incredible.
Now then I could probably go into, I don't know how much time we have, but I can go into how like I thought I was a big fish in a small pond coming in there. I was feeling myself. And then I attended my first meeting and I said, "Oh my gosh, these people are brilliant. They're going to find out any day that I don't deserve to
The
be here."
covers are coming
And
off. Uh-oh. Yeah.
right.
Well,
I'm
I
like,
tell
they're
a
using
story.
acronyms that I didn't even know about. I'm like, what? I'm like, there was no real palpable internet at that time where
Oh,
you could
yeah.
just
That's right. You
go
were
look
still
stuff up.
AOL
So,
dial-up CDs showing up in the mail,
right.
right? Yeah.
Right. So you had to like go buy books and go to Barnes and Nobles and read as much as you can for free. Like it was tough during those days.
Oh, buddy. Well, I'm older than you. You say you go back a ways. I started in the business world in '89, and I've been in this business for a long time. But I know what you speak of. And there's a thin line between self confidence and cockiness, and you were on the right side of that. I'm not saying anything bad there, but the number one thing that you exercised there was self awareness. When you looked around, you went, "Okay, hold on a second. There's a lot more to get in this world than I already got," and I think that's a big attribute that all people need to understand. Every generation is the most progressive versus the prior generation. They really think they got it all figured out, right? Because, well, you don't know, you're just an older person. I fight it now. I've
Hmm.
got 5 generations under my roof, right? On my
Yeah.
teams,
Yeah. Wow.
and everything's different. You have to understand that old can learn from new, and new can learn from old. And it's great that you realize that. But wow, what a great story!
Yeah. Thanks. I really like that point that you brought up because a lot of that actually wove its way into the book. Like my son, I got three kids, and my son was probably he was the student athlete. So
Yeah.
he's everything I wasn't when I was in school. And I told my kids like your number one job is just to be better than I was
Yep.
when I was your age, and in many cases that's not really hard to do. So he was a great student athlete. I would go to his practices. He's a football player, and I used to
Excellent.
watch his practices. And I'm watching the coaches, and I had this realization, which actually made its way into the book. It's that coaches coach how they were coached.
Yep.
And your point about the 5 generations and every generation thinks they have it figured out. I think that that's true, but I do think that there's progress across the generations.
Oh,
So like
absolutely. Absolutely.
the circumstance where somebody makes a mistake and somebody jumps off sides and the entire team has to take a lap during practice, or you run till you throw up, like those are the lessons that those coaches were coached with, and
Yep.
so that's what they think breeds success, and then that's what they're going to use. And I figured out that leaders lead how they were led,
No doubt.
managers manage how they were managed. And when I sat down to kind of think about all of my experiences and how some of these unhelpful behaviors kept reoccurring across multiple people, multiple teams, multiple organizations, even, I'm like, these are the things that they think are going to make them successful, and they're just going to continue them. They're just going to roll on.
Yep.
And so things like psychological safety and belongingness and empathy, when I got started, I'm a Gen Xer, so when I got started, those things didn't exist. You
They
just
weren't
put your
there.
nose to the
That's right.
grindstone
That's right.
and you toughen up, and then you either adopt those behaviors or you cope with them.
It's funny that you bring this up. I've talked about on the show in the past. Jack Welch by many is considered, my generation was the epitome of a CEO, what good looks like, right? And he
Yep.
was very command and control, right? It was all based on hierarchy, and how that developed and why business was that way for so long is leadership. What you saw in leadership was on the battlefields of World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and it was very regimented. I report to them, they report to somebody, that person tells them what to do, I do what they tell me to do. There was not a lot of
Hmm.
this open-mindedness to different approaches. Jack Welch came into the room, sat at the head of the table, and said, go do this. Today, leadership, no one has all the answers, and the pace at which everything moves and how we have to be agile and our business needs to stay efficient and effective as business owners, whatever service or product we're selling or providing, you got to be very agile. In those days, there
Hmm.
wasn't the pace of movement. So to continue to just don't fix what's not broken in their mind, there's so much more to it these days. The old dogs need to learn new tricks.
Hmm.
There's bi-directional benefits, my opinion, that happen here. The new generations are teaching me things all the time, and I hope I'm having impact on them. I tell this story. You used to go in when I was younger and a leader, or even not a leader yet, when I was thinking about getting into sales leadership and management, et cetera, back in 95. You'd go into a
Hmm.
meeting and you'd look for the gray-haired man or woman, and that's who you were going to pay
Hmm.
attention to because they're the ones with the
Right.
experience. That's who I need to listen to. Now I walk into a room, I look around and I go, oh shit, it's me. I better be good today. I'm the gray-haired guy. I better make sure I bring some good content here. But we've talked about in the past sitting at the middle of the table, coming in with vulnerability, right? I don't have this
Hmm.
answer. I need your help. Words that draw people into conversation. So I'm right with you on what you saw. And that kind of leads to this. What was the impetus of writing the book? What was all of a sudden that I'm going to put some of this stuff together, my thoughts and feelings on this? What led to writing the book?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll tell you the circumstance. I remember the instant where I thought that this might be something that was worth my time. So, when I worked with a couple of vice presidents, for this one manager,
Mm-hmm.
we all used to kind of feel each other out. We would like, let me tell you what my manager did,
Yeah.
or let me tell you what our boss did. And the more and more we started adding people, once you break that plane of like, can I complain about my manager to you without you running and telling my
Yeah.
manager
Once you
that
find
I'm
your safe
complaining?
space, right? That's right.
Right. We created this council of vice presidents that occupied the safe space. And we were like, can you believe what they did? Oh, can you believe what they said? They did this in this meeting. And we would all begin to pipe up and say, let me guess, this is what they said next. And this is what happened. They're like, yes, how did you know that? Because I've seen this before, not in this manager, but another manager I've had, or three other managers I've had in the past. And then we would start contributing how we coped and how we learned and what to do and how to move forward. And it was this really great vice president's therapy, is what we used to call it. And
That's awesome.
I said, gosh, somebody should write this stuff down because there are people coming behind us that are running through
Pay it
these
forward.
fences
Yeah.
right
Pay it
now.
forward.
Right.
Help those coming up the hill behind you.
Yeah, and I guess you'd say I'm mid or approaching late in career now. I've been around for 25 years, and I've been turning towards trying to make other people's lives easier. Just in terms of like being not surprised, not incensed by the injustice of encountering some of these unhelpful behaviors, and then not only surviving underneath them, but realizing that your manager is actually your biggest partner. They're your amplifier. And if they're not amplifying in the right way, or they're not supporting the right way, your job is to kind of try to grow them. And I know people groan when they hear the term managing upwards, but it is really an important skill
No,
for every
it's a
professional to learn.
huge. I was going to say just a few minutes ago, you beat me to the punch. Um, a couple things you mentioned there. First of all, your group therapy with the VPs. What you were exercising was understanding and finding and utilizing emotional intelligence. EQ is much more important than IQ as a leader.
Yes.
And you can be the smartest person in the room, but also a terrible leader. It's like you can be the best
Hmm.
salesperson or individual contributor. They try to put you into leadership, don't empower you with the skills. You don't hold the necessary skills that are just happen to be inside your system, right? A lot of things can be taught, but certain things can't. And then you get to a failure point, and everybody looks and goes, well, why'd they fail? You have to have that EQ or emotional intelligence really tied in to both give instruction and to receive instruction. Feedback's a gift if we choose to accept it. And as leaders, you've got to really open up the aperture to be willing to do that. You got to, it's a lot of leaders get in it. My first episode ever on this podcast was why be a leader. If you're looking to be in command, don't be a leader. If you're looking for the money, don't be a leader. I went through a whole bunch of things. Can't remember. It's 2.5 years ago now, all the details of the episode. But if you don't open up your mind that you're there to develop people and to get the best out of people and to drive aspiration and inspiration and perspiration in that order, then you're going to struggle as a leader. And that everybody should have also an outlet. I've got people, I'm the boss in my endeavors, and I have to have people that are on my team that I turn to so I can let steam off too. The leaders are carrying responsibility and pressures that we don't understand is going on that creates some of those behaviors too, right? They act the way they act because they just got hit across the head and face for 20 minutes. So
you're so right. Like the way that I characterized and wrote these archetypes, it's not to vilify people or to say that these managers that exhibit these behaviors are bad people. It's that these are a collection of recurring and unhelpful behaviors that they have no choice but to use. This is all that's in their toolbox.
Yep.
And relying on, as you said, emotional understanding and EQ, and accepting that no matter how galling, no matter how unjust the behaviors are and how they impact you, if you can process those emotions healthfully and then kind of resurge in your personal or your professional persona and say, if they had the choice to act this way, they probably wouldn't.
That's right.
They wouldn't choose to do these things. But there's no other tools. They have, they need a screwdriver, but they just have hammers in their toolbox.
Everything's a nail when you have just a hammer, right? I mean,
exactly. And so there's also, if you look at these individuals, they are under, like you said, immense pressure to drive results, to grow people, to be able to coach and mentor and support and all this stuff, and then to create a place of safety for people, which is present on the mind of every manager nowadays, because that stuff's actually measured in many organizations.
That's correct.
That's all an incredible crucible of challenges that these leaders have to kind of assume. Many of them, the more immature leaders that are new leaders, have this perception of, I must be infallible. As a leader, I must have all the answers. I must have all of the responses. And I need to show my people and the people above me that I can perform.
I can handle it. You pick the right person, right? It's all that internalized pressure that many times isn't even there.
Right.
So you talk about these archetypes, and I think in the book there's 9. And I just to list them for everybody. First of all, they're great. I'm reading the information that we exchanged and going through and go, man, he is all over this. The surprise leader, the emergency broadcaster, the complainer, the amnesiac. I love that one. The firefighter, the order taker, the raw nerve, the attack sub, and then last in, first out, LIFO. What are a couple of the key ones that you think are most predominant, or what ones? If you were to focus to a couple here for the next few minutes, what are the types that you think are best to talk about today?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple that leap out at me that I haven't talked about yet to folks. So I think the amnesiac is one of the most frustrating ones that I've had to deal with. And the amnesiac, just to kind of describe it, this is an individual or a leader that just frequently forgets past conversations, decisions, or commitments. And as a result of this forgetfulness, it makes their behaviors in high pressure situations where you're trying to convince a team or to convince an executive of something or trying to implement a strategy or launch a program, it makes them an inconsistent and unreliable presence and almost a volatile presence.
Yep.
So I'll give you an example. And actually, all of the narratives and examples in the book, I've changed the names, obviously.
You've lived through, yeah.
But they are from my actual professional career. They've actually happened. But obviously I couldn't put them all in the book. So there's one example where we're launching a product to evaluate, or a project to evaluate a cloud vendor for analytics.
Hmm.
And we are, and I had seen this forgetfulness happen before in my leader at the time. And my coping strategy that I write about in the book is the best way to prevent against this is to utilize, visual cues, refer to the same artifact, the same single slide, the same talking points, say the same things the same way, all these different coping tactics that I had to address a person that just forgets. And sometimes your goal is before the meeting with, in this instance with me, with the CIO,
Yep.
where we're trying to make this recommendation, because the CIO had an entrenched position about a provider, and we had to change their minds about this.
Mindset. Yeah. Mindset change.
Yep, yep. So I'm preparing all of my tricks, like emotional empathy, making sure he gets to the point where he's ready to listen to an alternative viewpoint, all this kind of stuff. And I was hoping to use my manager as an amplifier in that meeting. And so I had followed my advice that I wrote about in the book, which was as close to the meeting as possible, kind of load up your manager with all the talking points, all of the areas of opposition that you're planning to encounter, how you plan to overcome those oppositions, where your manager can come in and say, yes, Eric is right about this, and this is what I think is also, this are the reasons why. And so when it works, it's fantastic. In this instance, it didn't work at all. It's almost like I said, hey, do the opposite,
Yeah.
tear me down and become my worst adversary in this session. Can you do that, please? And they obliged.
So
Right.
they
So
managed
I'm
up. They fell in line with the already predetermined mindset of the CIO, and don't be a
despite the
disruptor.
fact,
Yep.
despite the fact that they were on my side before the day before the meeting, in the meeting, they completely turned on me and became my worst adversary. And maybe this was their strategy all along, and this was the worst way to do it. But the CIO eventually was like, well, wait a second. Sounds like Eric's got some data here. I mean, he understands my position. He restated it. I'm ready to listen to him. And he went to my manager. He's like, just give him a chance to talk about what his data says, what his recommendation says. And maybe that was their super cool strategy all along, but what a terrible way to go about it,
Yeah.
right?
Just, I mean,
For
to,
a young
yeah.
middle and career person.
Yeah.
And later I realized that that wasn't a strategy at all. They had just forgotten,
Isn't that
and
crazy?
it's like they're hearing it for the first time, and they forgot what the strategy was, why we're making these recommendations, how much energy that me and my team put into doing this research, and the goal of the session, which was to strategically pick a vendor that was going to provide the organization with significant return on
Better
investment that we
results. Yeah.
quantify.
Do
Right.
do you think amnesiacs, um, at times, a true amnesia is they don't remember. Do you think at times that,
Mhm.
and I know what the answer I think is going to be, but leaders will use that as a crutch to avoid, confrontation, or to avoid having to utilize courage to help drive change?
I don't think so. I think that that is what the order taker is all about, which I
Okay.
can talk about in a second,
Okay.
which is like their job is to maintain harmony. I
Gotcha.
think the amnesiac, and I'm a technologist, so I use a couple technical terms. I utilize RAM stack and ROM stack. So
Yep.
for everybody that
Random
knows probably
access.
what that
Yep.
is.
Yep. Yep.
Yep, RAM is temporary memory. It's
Yep.
your working memory, short-term memory, and ROM is your long-term memory. These leaders that fall into the amnesiac category, they are so overloaded with a bunch of information. They are just making decisions and saying things as information comes in. It sticks in RAM for maybe less than
They clear the
24
hard drive.
hours.
They clear the hard drive.
They
Yep.
they
Yep.
clear it right out, and it's like it never happened. And I think that that's really in observing these archetypes that for the amnesiac, that's really the challenge.
It's a
Is
retention
that
issue. Gotcha.
it never goes into their long-term memory. And the coping strategy I write about in the book is how you actually use everything from visual cues, mnemonic
Trying to get
devices,
it to
how you
stick.
actually,
I'm following
how
you.
do you get it into ROM? Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep. That's great stuff. So, can we talk about the order taker then in reference to
Yeah,
that question? I said, describe what you think the order taker archetype is then. Archetype,
yeah,
excuse me.
yes. Yeah, so this archetype and I've encountered this maybe 5 or 6 times in my career, and it's sparse. But when it happens, you're like, oh, gosh, I can see it. I know this one. And so if you're sitting in a meeting, executive meetings, our chief data officer at the time was kind of like, all right, I need these new. I want to bring in a new analytics tool. I want a semantic repository, a whole bunch of stuff. They had this
Mm-hmm.
laundry list of items that
Mm-hmm.
the organization at the time I worked for the infrastructure group. It was our job to make sure that those things materialized. So we basically take the laundry list from the executive, and our job, my job at the time, and I'm writing all this stuff down, is to say, all right, let's create a program of execution. Let's instrument this program with dates and milestones, and let's figure out how much we can parallelize and how much we can actually how much do we have to defer until we have enough resources and funding to address some of these issues. Um, Now, my manager was in this meeting as well, and she's taking the same notes. We leave the meeting and we walk into our own staff meeting, and it's almost like everything that the team is working on. This is a team of about, I don't know, maybe 500, 600 people.
Okay.
Everything that they're working on it gets put on hold. We have new orders from our chief data officer. This is now what we're doing. And everybody is like, wait, 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 wait. We just
What
had
just
this
happened?
same thing happen. Yeah, what just happened? And you just said that we had to stop everything that we were working on 2 months ago to focus on something that happened a month ago. And now we're doing it again. And the order taker, basically, if you look at their motivations, they want harmony. They want compliance. They
Mm-hmm.
want to be a team player. They want to show the executive that I can handle it. No problem. When you ask, we'll crush it. And they believe that by just saying yes to everything, that harmony, that compliance means that they can be counted on. They can be seen as a team player. If I ask this manager to do something, then I know they're going to take it in and, well, not do it, because that's the downside.
Right.
Because if you take in all these things and you keep taking in new things and you keep moving people from one thing to another without letting them finish, you don't deliver any results. And that's the treadmill that we were on.
Gotcha.
We would get new orders taken. The commitment was, yep, absolutely. How high? Do you want fries with that? And people would people would say, but I didn't finish the last thing I was working on. If we don't deliver this, this is going to have negative impact on the organization. I'm working on a security feature. If we don't complete the security feature, customer information will be exposed and we will face lawsuits. It
Well,
doesn't necessarily matter to the order taker.
it's so
And that's the
funny.
frustrating thing.
Yeah, it's so funny because you aren't delivering ROI at that point. You're delivering LOI, loss of investment, right? If you never complete a
Right.
task, you said you're just on the, spinning your wheels. What a
Yeah.
terrible place to be. Do you think the
And
order?
what
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to interject there, Brent. What a lot of organizations do, in my experience, I'd be curious to get your perspective here, is that they reward busyness. So you might say, well, if you're a leader and you're constantly taking orders and you're never finishing anything, how
Hmm.
are you still around?
There's,
And
yeah,
it's the rewarding of busyness. My team is so busy, I'm understaffed. Now we've got all these new things to do, plus the old things that we didn't get to. And people feel good when, I guess, people underneath them are busy. And that's not necessarily the best way to run a team and to make people feel satisfied about what they're doing. And those are some of the big challenges.
my feedback is this. I see it every day. There's an old saying that I use that kind of ties into this. If you want a job well done, you ask the busy man because the others have no time. And the truly busy person that is accomplishing goals and moving things forward and getting first downs in the grind of business life will find a way to take an additional responsibility on and take it to completion. Then there's others that just run in circles. There's memes online that are just hysterical where they're like unloading a truck and one guy puts his hand on every box but never lifts a single thing. Right? It's just touching everything and looking like, the old joke of you drive by a city crew and there's five guys standing around the outside of the hole and one guy down with a shovel. There's all these
Yep.
things that come into mind about that, that truly happens. And reactiveness. So you say my response on this. My company itself, I love my company. I love the people. The business environment around, and we're a technology company, and COVID had dramatic effects on us. But what
Hmm.
we found ourselves constantly doing is rewriting the playbook over and over again, trying to adapt to the market, but never working on execution. We didn't know if the results are going to come because by the time you manage the change, you implement change, you convince and get mindset right, you evangelize it enough where people start to get in the boat with you, you don't ever get the opportunity in sales and in service organizations. You know this too. The sales cycle isn't a 60-day sales cycle. Some of these engagements take years. You never allowed the execution to happen before you changed the playbook. We're not running the sweep to the right anymore. Now we're throwing a pass play. Restart everything.
Yep.
And all you're doing is just digging and digging and digging a hole deeper and deeper to not come out of. I actually have said to the CEO of my organization, we got to quit writing plays in the dirt and just run some plays. I don't care if they're even the right plays at this point. We've got to work on some execution here. Your son's in football. I'm a little bit older. I was a football player. Love college football. Love all football. Well, the Green Bay Packers won Super Bowls with 3 plays: sweep right, sweep left, and a dive. I mean, and all it was every year Lombardi came in, same players, held up a ball and said, "Gentlemen, this is a football. We're going to be perfect at execution. If we out-execute, we outperform." Doesn't have to be fancy. Now, the game has changed completely, right? The speeds and everything which happens, you can't do that. There's just too much beef in the line for that to happen. But the really good teams in anything in life get really good at execution. Strategy is smoked by execution. You can have a bad strategy with good execution to move the ball. You can have a great strategy with no execution, and you're 3 and out every single time you have the ball. So
what a powerful analogy. And in terms of the order taker, you never execute. You start to execute, you run the play, and then a flag is thrown.
Yep.
And the flag is new stuff to do.
Yep. Time out. Freeze your own kicker.
Yep. Yeah. Ice your own kicker. And that's really what it is. It's the pursuit of harmony, the pursuit of, yes, you're valuable, you're a team player. I can count that you're on it, but never realizing that you're never going to finish. And that actually creates a sense of dissatisfaction in the people. They begin to, as they start working on something, how much can I put my heart and soul into this?
Why would I do this when it's not going to be done? Right.
Right. I'm never going to finish this thing.
Right.
Yeah. So all I really need to do is do the George Costanza, if you're a Seinfeld fan, which is to look busy.
That's right.
To look busy, and then just to wait until something new comes along. And in many instances, your top talent is actually going to leave. One of the best, I think you mentioned Jack Welch was the CEO model for your generation.
Yep.
And I'm biased because I worked at Microsoft for so long, but I think Satya Nadella is the model for my generation.
Yep.
The servant leadership mentality.
Totally. My favorite word.
I had a chance to spend some time with him at Microsoft and work on a couple of projects next to him. And he used to tell me, he's like, "Eric, people don't quit companies. They don't quit teams. They quit managers."
100%.
And in this example, you've got a manager that's just constantly moving the cheese and not letting your top talent get into the work and have them feel that sense of completion, satisfaction, and delivering results to the point where it's detrimental. I mean, for organizations that still stack rank at the end of a performance cycle, if you can't point to something because you were jerked around for so many, from one assignment to another assignment, and all you were is busy, but the performance appraisal is all of what did you deliver, that's a challenge at
results
the end. And your top talent's going to recognize that.
Yeah, results matter. And yes, I am a Seinfeld fan. I was going to use a George Costanza reference a few minutes ago, and I was like, I don't know if he's and where I was going to use it when you talked about your manager doing all the opposite things when you were in with the CIO. When George,
the opposite episode.
The opposite episode when it was successful for him, but not successful in your example.
Right.
What do you think the most challenging type is of the 9 that you look at to manage around, up, and through that leadership type? What do you think is the most challenging of the 9?
I think it has to be a tie between 2 of them. The one is the firefighter, and the other is the attack sub. These are probably the most aggravating ones, not the most shocking ones, not the ones that produce the most sense of injustice or like, I can't believe this is happening, but just the most challenging to deal with. And I think the firefighter one, just to quickly describe it, is this is an individual, a leader that thrives when there's a crisis. Systems are down, clouds are down, people can't process transactions. You're an e-commerce customer or your e-commerce company and your customers can't move money. The shopping carts are frozen. Money is stopped. You call this person, and they come into the network operations center, and they are amazing. They are doing everything from calling in off-duty developers to sitting down to terminals and writing code and deploying it in real time to fix things, to just leading through crisis. They are putting the fires out. And these individuals are alive and super proficient. And you were just, if it's the first time you're going through it with this type of manager, you're like, wow, I wish I could be
Yep.
that way in a crisis.
In awe. Yeah.
Now, eventually, what'll happen is the C-level execs will come through and they'll high five, great job, manager, you and the team, everybody go home and get a good night's sleep. You came in off hours, you put the fire out, nice work. And it's amazing until it happens again, and then it happens again, and you're failing, and these crises and these fires are the same cause. It's the same root cause, and it's happening again and again and again until, like for myself, at one point I'm like, hey, this is too many fires, and this is not fun anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Let me architect a way in which we can get ourselves out of this.
Root cause.
So
yeah,
let's do a root cause analysis. Let's do some re-architecture. Let's actually gather requirements. Let's build the next generation of the system that is going to be self-healing, that is going to be, fault tolerant. It's going to auto scale. It's going to do all these things that we know modern applications and services need to do. And the manager is just like this shadow or shell of himself when he's in these situations.
Mm-hmm.
And you recognize that the fact that they just don't have the gear to think ahead to prevent the fire. Because and to me, it's a couple of root causes. The first is that maybe they like that. That's how success was measured in the past. And that's how they prove their worth and their value.
Yeah.
And maybe at some point they're like, well, what if there are no fires? What do I really
What's
do
my
here?
value? Yeah, exactly
Right.
right. My skill set's no longer needed.
Right. Yeah, and obviously in the book, I write about how, well, you have to shift the dopamine response from that,
Mm-hmm.
that energy they get while they're fighting fires to days without incident.
That's right.
Prevention is better than fire damage, because eventually in my circumstance, what came along is an executive that was new to the company is like, hey, is everybody okay? I heard this was a fire. This is the fourth one that happened. Why are there so many fires? Can't we
Right,
stop this?
right. What can
And
we
the
change?
manager's like, well, and they're invisibly or visibly dragging their feet and saying, no, we can't change that, or that's not something that we could change.
That's how we've
We just have
always done it. Yeah.
how we've always done it, right?
Then what's the
So that was
attack?
super challenging.
What's the attack sub like then in compare?
The attack sub manager is one in which, I'll give you an example from my life. So, sitting at an airport, waiting to travel for business,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden I get this, these messages from Slack or Teams on my phone. Hey, tomorrow when you land, don't go to the conference. You're going to need to go to this side room in the hotel, and the CIO is going to be there, and we're going to need to present our proposal for how we reorient the sales program, and we bring people up to speed from a training perspective. We need to identify our training curriculum, put together a few slides, and be ready to present. And I go, okay, you know what? Sometimes these emergency requests happen. You got to, be ready for them.
Yeah.
And so you start asking all the questions. So CIO, who else is going to be there? Will you be there? What's the scope? What's the audience? What's the message that I want to drive? I think it's this. And I'm typing in all of these clarifying messages, and they're just hitting dead air. So the attack sub manager goes silent for a while, emerges, and says, shoots off a whole bunch of orders. Be here, this date, these slides, and end of message. And then they submerge again and go radio silent.
Gotcha. Lacking
And so
context and details and everything of
Right.
of how to make the most of the request, right? You're trying to deliver as much benefit as possible in the time allowed, and they aren't even giving you what the whole commentary needs to be surrounded yet.
Exactly right. Now, the backside of this behavior is when they surface again right before the meeting, literally in this case, right outside the room before we walk in. Hey, Eric, let me see your slides. What do you have? And I showed my slides, and I goes, I didn't have a lot to go on, so I did my best to think about what I would want to hear if I were this person. And so they're like, no. This is not even what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
So
like help me,
I'm
help
like, well,
you. Yeah.
Exactly. If you had just answered my questions, if you had just given me, a little bit of guidance, that I asked for, and wasn't unreasonable. It wasn't like, how do I do this? It's like, I think is this right? It would have gone much, much smoother. And so the attack sub manager erupts again, and then just, I call, does the swoop and poop. They look at what you've produced,
That will be
and
stolen.
they're like, no, this is all terrible. Like, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
And so that was very difficult to deal with because they just go dark. And I write about some strategies that I developed over the course of maybe 10 years
Yeah.
to deal with this type of unhelpful behavior.
What are they? What are a couple of them?
The one that I love that works out really well across all instances where I've encountered this manager type is what I call channel switching. So these managers become numb. So I don't know if you've ever noticed, maybe there's people in your lives that are just bad texters, right?
Mm-hmm.
They text you something and then they go silent. And you're like,
Hold on,
where'd you
man. We
go?
were talking here.
Right, right. And so these people become numb to what I call input channels. They become numb to emails. They become numb to Slack messages, numb to Teams messages,
Just don't engage.
and they reach saturation, and they're like, I just can't. I can't. These are people with thousands of messages in their inbox. These are people that declare email bankruptcy by going and saying, "Mark all is read," and then the new stuff that comes in is the stuff they pay attention to
That's
for
right.
maybe about 15 to 20 minutes or so. So channel switching is a scenario in which you use novelty to engage with this attack sub manager. So if in that scenario where my manager said, "Hey, go produce these slides," and I go, "Wait, I need to understand all these things." Um, and if they don't reply on the same channel, meaning in this instance Slack or Teams,
Pick up the
you
phone.
switch channels.
Yep.
Yeah, pick up the phone maybe because nowadays people, your number might be spam, or they'd be like, "I don't have time to talk to you. I'm
Yep.
like, with
Yep.
my kids." So you channel switch to an asynchronous message, like, so you switch to text. "Hey, got your, totally on board with the presentation. I'm going to do this. Let me know if you have any issues with this." And by switching to the channel, it's a novelty. "Oh, Eric's texted me. He never texts me. Oh, this is, oh yeah, no problem. Let me just answer this."
Yep.
And depending on the manager, sometimes they quickly reach saturation through the text channel. So you think that might be if I don't get the information I need, let me just switch channels to text.
Try
Doesn't
another
work
avenue.
because they've reached
Yeah.
saturation.
Yeah.
Try another avenue.
Yep.
Text their personal phone. Go switch to Slack. Go
Knock
back
on-
to email.
pull in their driveway, knock on their door.
Right. You gotta keep the channel novel, and then you understand that it'll quickly reach saturation in a matter of hours or days.
Yep. Oh, it's so funny. I'm just going. So I've had in my career, I've been doing this for 36 years. I've had 20 bosses, I suppose.
Mhm.
And there's good ones and there's great ones and there's okay ones, and you try to take something from everybody. But when you're talking about these experiences, I'm reminiscing, right? And
Mhm.
I think how my leadership style developed was trying to concentrate on all the things. And I certainly don't have it all figured out. So when I say these things, I'm not saying this is the right way to do it. This is what has worked for me. But I always looked at how not to do things right. I'm going to avoid that.
Right.
You said something earlier. I am a servant's attitude leader. I use the word appreciation, interacting with everyone I speak to. I really appreciate you, and I want you to know that, and
That's
I mean
great.
it, right? And again, it's not. I'm not trying to look for pats on the back. I'm just giving feedback that is constructive right along your lines, because I think you've nailed it here, right? Managing up is a skill that develops over time. I was not as good at it in my earlier leadership days as I am today. And the only thing I would say, tongue in cheek here, managing up, you have to be careful because the difference between ass kissing and brown nosing is nothing more than depth perception. Don't go too deep on managing up. So,
Love that.
you just, you have to learn how to interact with all people. I've always said as a leader of sales and service and professional services and software integration teams, that we have to utilize the psychology that is in between their ears. I'm a psychologist by association. I have spent a lot of couch time with people in my careers. They come to have problems solved. They come for guidance. I've done mentorship and mentee and all these things. And what people really need to understand, and this is what Jack Welch didn't get, it was through command and control, and all I said about how the military really created our leaders for so long, is you do need to understand what makes other people click to maximize the
Hmm.
results from them. As a leader, you're trying to get more out of people than they themselves know they are capable of. And
Hmm.
by understanding what makes them tick, there's all the TED Talks on what's your why. Great theory, 100% agree with it. Call it whatever you want. Just understand
Hmm.
people and everybody's facing something that they aren't sharing. Everybody's got
Right.
something in their mind that is impacting their daily capabilities. And if you can get them to open up and freely communicate, some managers don't like confrontation. Well, don't call it
Hmm.
confrontation mentally, call it carefrontation. I'm here to help move it forward. Either you're not in the right space, or let's get what's in your way out of your mindset to allow you to continue to develop. If leaders will embrace communication, it goes back to what you're just saying, the different channels. Context is, I am old, I'm a little bit old school here. I like to be face to face people and talking. I understand that other generations prefer texting, prefer messaging, prefer social media, etc. So you have to be very good at all of that. But I do think when
Hmm.
people are face to face, you get a lot more of the real happening, because people are able to act differently. Passive aggressiveness is much more prevalent through email and texting than it is face to face, right? People won't say that to
Hmm.
you. I've actually said to my bosses before, when they're getting a little too aggressive, you wouldn't say that in the alley outside the bar to me, so I would suggest we don't use that avenue right now either, right? Not a
That's
threat.
funny.
I just want you to know that's not an acceptable way in which to interact here, and it's okay to tell a boss that. And again,
Hmm.
feedback's a gift if they choose to accept it. Some bosses are just, I'm the boss, and you know what you got. Don't worry, they're going to work themselves out of that position pretty quickly, because others will figure it
Yeah.
out. The results aren't going to be there. So, what a great deal. So, how can people get access at your book? And it's coming out, I think, on the 12th. Is that right?
That's right. It's coming out on the 12th. It's available for pre-order on Amazon right now. So if you go to Amazon and search for "Have you ever had a boss that?" It should be
My
the
wife
first
was
result
looking
that
at it
pops
this
up.
morning, pre ordering. She's a
Oh,
book fanatic.
fantastic. And tell her I appreciate it.
You bet.
But yes, it's available there. It'll be in all the formats that you can get it from on Amazon. I'm really looking forward to hearing from folks and what they think, and if it's been valuable. The responses I've gotten so far as I'm writing it, people are just kind of like giddy with like, oh yes, I've seen that one before. I've seen that behavior before. Or,
It's a great
never encountered
topic.
this one before.
It's a great topic. Everybody has somebody that they've interacted with, in their
Yeah.
life. What?
And
Go
the
ahead.
interesting thing that I wanted to add is, as a leader reading this book, as a manager, you have the opportunity to kind of certainly utilize the techniques to manage your management chain as well. But
That's right.
I often, when I was writing it, I reflected on myself as a leader, and said, "Hey, maybe I am a bit of an amnesiac. I should probably watch out for that."
Self
My
evaluation.
hope is that
Yeah.
you'll,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. People will kind of just find it valuable from both directions if you are a manager or leader.
That's awesome. Last question, just to kind of make sure we touch them all uh, that we wanted to get to. Anything in particular you want to make sure that the listeners out there, and it's individual contributors, it's leaders, it's
Hmm.
friends, it's people of all sorts that are listening. We're picked up in 71 countries, are pretty regular listeners. What would you want to make sure you wanted to get across in your message today to the listeners?
I think if there's a maybe one thing that I would kind of wrap it up in a bow is I think that the closest thing that human beings have to magic is confidence and hope. And the reason why I think that those are two important ingredients is because these behaviors, these unhelpful behaviors, persist in silence.
Mm-hmm.
You may feel that you're suffering from them alone. You may feel that you might not even you ask yourself, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe this is the way things are done. And then the worst thing that'll happen is you'll start to adopt these unhelpful behaviors as your in your own toolbox as means to success. And so the goal is for you to not be silent, but also don't be foolish. Try to be diplomatic, try to leverage empathy. You may not be an empathetic person. I know myself, I'm typically not, but I have a lot of what's called cognitive empathy,
Mm-hmm.
which is I can understand people's feelings without experiencing them myself, and then utilize that understanding to get them to a point where they're willing to listen to your advice. Managers typically are seen by their teams as people that hold their performance, in their hands, their economic rewards,
Hmm.
how successful or how prosperous you are. And so there's this built-in reverence that you have for your manager, which I think is great.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're people too, and they are team members too, and you can collaborate with them, and grow them just as much as you might a colleague. So that's the kind of the way I would kind of wrap that up.
Great feedback. I say to the people all the time on my teams, they're going to meet with a C-suite individual. They're just people. They get up in the morning, they go to
Right.
bed at night, they eat 3 meals a day if they're lucky. They have kid problems, they have family problems, they're dealing with something that we don't know about. Approach them as people and they'll respect you for it. And
Hmm.
I think all the feedback has been great. So everybody, please check out the book. Again, Eric Charran. It's being released on February 12th. The book is called Have You Ever Had a Boss That? Available at Amazon, pre-order as of today. Take what he has put in this book and the conversations today and input it into your lives, your business lives, your personal lives. These things work in personal relationships too. And take this stuff, and what's going to happen is it's going to make you awesome. Then you keep that shit up. We'll talk next week.